This is Steve White, your friendly podcast host and your guide for today's quick jaunt through all the cool events that happened on this day in sports history. This Day in Sports History is a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more info and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. On this day in 1976, Hammerin' Hank Aaron hit the final home run of his career. At this point in his career, Aaron was playing in his 23rd season, and he was playing with the Milwaukee Brewers in a limited role as the designated hitter. The Brewers were hosting the California Angels, and when Aaron came to the plate with 2 out and none on in the 7th inning, he took a Dick Drago pitch into the left field seats for number 755. It was just his 10th of the season in what would be his worst year statistically. He hit just .229, and he retired after the 1976 season. But despite the numbers, this is a historic home run, and it's commemorated. Milwaukee's County Stadium was torn down in 2001, but there is a plaque marking the spot where the ball landed in the parking lot of Miller Park. Now, a couple of interesting facts about this one. Bobby Bonds, the father of the man who eventually surpassed Aaron's all-time record, was playing right field for the Angels, and he watched Aaron's final 4-bagger sail out of the park. Barry Bonds was a few days away from turning 12 on this day. And the man who wound up with the home run ball was groundskeeper Richard Arndt. Arndt tried to return the ball to Aaron that night, hoping for a signed bat in exchange, but his effort was rebuffed. The next day, the Brewers fired Arndt for what they called theft of company property, meaning he was terminated for taking the ball home with him, and he was docked the price of a baseball in his final paycheck. But don't feel too bad for Arndt. He eventually sold the ball in 1999 for $625,000. Let's go to the other end of the home run spectrum and talk about a guy who hit only 6 in his career. But there's a funny story attached to this one. So first, we have to go back to 1962, 7 years before the event that actually happened on this day. San Francisco pitcher Gaylord Perry was taking some cuts in the batting cage, and he was sending some bombs over the fence in Candlestick Park. A San Francisco reporter took notice, and he made a comment to Giants manager Alvin Dark. "Hey, this Perry kid, he's going to hit some home runs for you, huh?" Dark looked at the reporter as if he had 4 heads, and he replied, "There will be a man on the moon before Gaylord Perry hits a home run." Fast forward 7 years to this day in 1969, because on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin piloted the Eagle lander to the Sea of Tranquility, with Armstrong hopping down the ladder to put the first human footprints in the moon's dusty surface. The world looked on in awe. It brought tears to the eyes of stoic newsman Walter Cronkite. About an hour later, Gaylord Perry stepped into the batter's box in the 3rd inning against LA's Claude Osteen, and he sent one of Osteen's pitches into the candlestick seats in deep left for his first career home run, proving Alvin Dark to be a baseball Nostradamus. Now, obviously, people paid money to purchase a ticket for each one of those games. Well, on this day in 1858, it was the first time admission was ever charged for a baseball game. I'm using the excellently written Why is the Foul Pole Fair by Vince Staten as my reference for this one, and he writes that baseball historians traced charging to watch a game back to a contest between the New York All-Stars and the Brooklyn All-Stars. Each person was charged 50 cents, with about 1,500 paying to give the game a long look. That would be about a $15 ticket price in today's money. The game even had a newspaper writer there to chronicle the event for the New York Mercury. In 2007, it was a controversy that shook up basketball and seemed to be the evidence that some needed to support their claim of the NBA being rigged. On this day, the FBI released information about an investigation involving NBA referee Tim Donaghy gambling on games in which he officiated. Donaghy had resigned as a ref 11 days earlier after evidence surfaced that he had been providing his co-conspirators with information about games and his manipulation of calls to push an outcome in a particular direction. When games went the way he said they would, he profited. It was not a good look for the NBA. Commissioner David Stern went into crisis mode, saying, quote, "I've been involved with the NBA for 40 years in some shape or form, and I can tell you that this is the most serious situation and worst situation that I have ever experienced, either as a fan of the NBA, a lawyer for the NBA, or as the commissioner of the NBA." End quote. But were other officials involved? How deep did this go? Stern insisted that Donaghy went rogue, and he had acted alone, cloaking his actions from the league and other officials. But seriously, could fans trust what was happening on the court? I mean, we all like to yell at the refs. We all see a bad call as some sort of favoritism to the other team. Star players get special treatment, right? But throw in a crooked ref, maybe a league full of crooked refs, and the entire credibility of the league comes into question. Donaghy pled guilty to wire fraud and transmitting betting information through interstate commerce, and was eventually sentenced to 15 months in federal prison, serving 11. The NBA tried to become as transparent as possible in the months following, calling out mistakes by officials after games, and even replaying the final minutes of a game between Miami and Atlanta when Shaq was rung up for his 6th foul when it was really just his 5th. Fortunately for Stern and the NBA, a couple of other sports stories, such as Mike Vick's dogfighting trial and Spygate, knocked the story to the back pages of the sports section and off SportsCenter for the most part, and the controversy drifted away. In 2003, it was one of the most unlikely winners of a major championship ever. Ben Curtis just wanted to play well and possibly make the weekend. He was the 396th ranked player in the world heading into the Open Championship in 2003, played that year at Royal St. George's in Sandwich, England. This was Curtis's first major tournament appearance. He had also never finished in the top 10 in any of the PGA events he'd played in since turning pro 4 years earlier. And yet, here he was on Sunday, having played solid rounds in the first 3 days to put him on the leaderboard. Curtis started his round on this day riding a rocket, birdieing 6 of the first 11 holes to grab a 2-shot lead. But 4 bogeys over the last 5 holes brought him back to earth a little bit, but still, he was the leader in the clubhouse at 1 under. Tiger faltered. So did Davis Love and Vijay Singh in the final few holes. But when Thomas Bjorn birdied 14 to get to 4 under, it looked like the fairy tale ending would fade away for Curtis. But Bjorn's final 4 holes would be a nightmare, going bogey, double bogey, bogey par to finish with a final round 72 and 1 shot back of Curtis. The 16th, where he made double, Bjorn needed 3 shots to get out of a greenside bunker. Ben Curtis became the first player in 90 years since Francis Ouimet in 1913 to win a major tournament in his first attempt. In 1983, former Heisman Trophy winner Billy Cannon was denied entry into the College Football Hall of Fame. So, a few questions first. What qualifies a person for Hall of Fame induction? Is it simply what they do on the field, or does character matter? What about legal troubles that happen decades after you finish playing? Billy Cannon was a 2-time All-American running back at LSU in the 1950s. He led the Tigers to a national championship in 1958. His Halloween run punt return against an undefeated Ole Miss team in 1959 is still shown at LSU games, and he went on to win the Heisman Trophy in '59. In 1983, he was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, but when he pleaded guilty to felony counterfeiting, his nomination was withdrawn. The board that made the decision said that Hall of Fame candidates must not only be great players, but also good citizens. Cannon had been part of a $6 million counterfeiting ring, printing $100 bills. The College Football Hall of Fame would reconsider his qualifications for induction, and Cannon was eventually inducted in 2008. In 1985, it was supposed to be the exciting rematch, or maybe grudge match would be a better phrase, but it turned out to be more of a nothing burger. 11 months earlier, in the women's 3,000-meter final in the 1984 Olympics, Mary Decker-Slaney got tangled up with South Africa's Zola, who was running for England at the time. Decker-Slaney fell to the track, and her hopes for a gold medal were dashed. On this day, Budd and Decker-Slaney were lining up against each other for the first time since that fateful entanglement at the Peugeot-Talbot Games in Minneapolis. ABC Sports was in the house to broadcast the race. Maybe there would be more contact, maybe an elbow thrown. Maybe Decker-Slaney would intentionally trip Budd as payback. Instead, the two shook hands before the event, ran shoulder to shoulder with no contact for 5 laps before Decker-Slaney picked up the pace, separated from the pack, and powered away to a win by 40 meters over second place. Budd finished a distant 4th. So, it was more a Geraldo Rivera Al Capone's vault disappointment rather than an exciting grudge match. And in 1986, Greg LeMond became the first American cyclist to ever wear the yellow jersey. After stage 17, LeMond took the yellow jersey from his teammate Bernard Hinault. In a tour when LeMond had been promised that he would be the leader of his La Vie Claire team, he was double-crossed and stabbed in the back by Hinault. When Hinault had blown up on a tough mountain stage the day before, LeMond cut the GC lead down to 40 seconds, and then he completed his takeover on this day. Despite being attacked at nearly every turn for the next stages, LeMond clung to the yellow jersey all the way to Paris to win by more than 3 minutes over Hinault. And time now for today's Non-Sports Did You Know? And as mentioned earlier, it's the anniversary of the moon landing, and while Neil Armstrong took the first step on the moon, Buzz Aldrin can lay claim to being the first man to pee on the moon. Well, he didn't actually unzip the old spacesuit and take a whiz on a moon rock. He peed in a bag in his spacesuit while he was on the moon, but you get what I'm saying, right? Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for stopping by and giving this a listen. I'll be back tomorrow for more great stuff on this day in sports history. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.